On October 3rd, 1995, an album arrived that didn't just dominate the charts, it reshaped the very architecture of modern celebrity. I often talk about peaks in these deep dives, but what happened with Daydream was not a peak. It was a monolith. It debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200. It moved 224,000 copies in its first week, a staggering number for a female artist at the time. It would go on to be certified diamond, selling over 25 million copies globally, and it spawned the single that held the number 1 spot in America for 16 consecutive weeks, a record that stood unchallenged for nearly a quarter of a century. But if you look past the platinum plaques and the diamond certification, Daydream is a document of a profound psychological conflict. To the executives at Sony Music, this album was business as usual. It was the next logical step for their greatest asset, a polished product designed to keep the revenue flowing. But to Mariah Carey, it was a mutiny. If her previous album, Music Box, was the sound of a vocalist surrendering to the corporate machine, Daydream was the sound of that woman quietly dismantling the machine from the inside. It's a record that smiles through 1,000 tears. It's the moment where the vocal athlete died and the architect of modern pop was born. In this deep dive, we're going to deconstruct Mariah Carey's magnum opus and my personal choice for the greatest album in her discography. We'll analyze the 9-to-5 studio sessions that felt more like a prison sentence than a creative retreat. We'll uncover the secret grunge album she recorded in the middle of the night to keep her sanity. And we'll examine how a girl from Long Island forced the most conservative record label in history to embrace the sound of the streets. This is the story of Daydream. To understand the stakes of 1995, we have to understand the gilded cage Mariah Carey was living in. By 1994, she was the biggest-selling female artist of the decade. She was married to Tommy Mottola, the CEO of Sony Music. From the outside, it looked like a fairy tale. She lived in a sprawling mansion in upstate New York equipped with recording studios, servants, and security. But inside, the walls were closing in. Mottola viewed Mariah not just as his wife, but as a billion-dollar corporation that needed to be protected from outside forces. That meant no rap music, no street clothes, no deviations from the formula that sold 28 million copies of Music Box. But Mariah, in her own words, was a radio addict.
I'm a radio addict, and I grew up listening to the radio night and day, and I still do. And there's never a time when I'm without a radio or without music. So I'm one of those people that always said, I would listen to the radio and go, that's going to be number 1, whatever song. And I was usually a pretty good indicator of that because I just live through the music so much that I always used to do that. So whatever that means.
While the label tried to mold her into the next Barbra Streisand, Mariah was listening to Wu-Tang Clan. She was listening to Biggie. She was listening to the sound of New York City evolving without her. She realized that if she didn't adapt, she would become a relic. So she began the Daydream sessions with a strategy. She would give the label the ballads they required, but she would inject them with a sonic texture they were too old to understand. This duality is best heard on a deep cut that remains a fan favorite, Underneath the Stars. This wasn't the bombastic pop of Hero. This was subtle. It was a vibe. Mariah wanted to channel the Minnie Riperton era, that hazy 1970s soul warmth. She insisted on using a real Fender Rhodes piano to get that authentic, dusty sound. It's a track that floats. It feels weightless. It was the first sign that Mariah was no longer singing for the rafters. She was singing for herself. But if Underneath the Stars was a gentle nod to her past, her next move was a violent shove into the future. The lead single is often the most political statement an artist can make. For Daydream, the label wanted a safe, mid-tempo pop song, so Mariah gave them Fantasy. The conception of this song is legendary. Mariah was listening to the radio and heard Genius of Love by Tom Tom Club. That infectious, bouncy loop triggered something, and she took the idea to producer Dave Hall. The bass song is pure pop perfection. It's bubblegum, it's joy. But Mariah wasn't satisfied with a pop hit. She wanted street cred, she called Sean Puffy Combs. She didn't ask her A&R reps who was charting. She didn't ask for a safe rapper like Will Smith. She told Puffy, I want O.D.B, Old Dirty Bastard, the loose cannon of the Wu-Tang Clan, a man who was like the antithesis of everything Sony Music stood for. When Mariah brought his name up in the boardroom, the executives were bewildered. They feared this collaboration would ruin her image. They thought it would alienate the soccer moms who bought Music Box. But Mariah understood the cultural zeitgeist better than they did. She knew that the lines between pop and hip-hop were dissolving. The Fantasy remix wasn't just a song, it was a paradigm shift. It became the blueprint for the next 2 decades of pop music. The pop princess featuring the rapper formula that we see today with everyone from Ariana Grande to Taylor Swift. It started here, and the commercial results were immediate and undeniable. Fantasy debuted at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. Let me repeat that. It debuted at #1. Before this moment, a female artist had never achieved a #1 debut in the history of the chart. Only Michael Jackson had done it. Mariah Carey shattered the glass ceiling with a sample from 1981 and a verse from the Wu-Tang Clan. Internationally, the song was a juggernaut. It hit #1 in Australia and in New Zealand. And in the United Kingdom, a notoriously difficult market for R&B at the time, it climbed to #4 on the official charts and stayed in the top 40 for 11 weeks. She had proven the label wrong. She'd brought the streets to the suburbs, but while she was winning the war for her sound, she was fighting a secret war for her sanity. There's a chapter in the Daydream story that was erased from history for 25 years. In 1995, while spending her days perfecting the pristine, multi-layered harmonies of Fantasy, Mariah Carey was spending her nights doing something completely inexplicable. She was secretly recording an alternative rock album. The band was called Chick. The album was called Someone's Ugly Daughter, and for decades, nobody knew it was her. The story goes like this. The Daydream sessions were high pressure. The pursuit of vocal perfection was exhausting. So when the executives left the studio, Mariah would sneak into the B room. She'd turn up the volume to 11, grab a guitar, although she didn't play guitar, and she would scream. She said, I was playing with the style of the breezy, grunge, punk-light white female singers who were popular at the time. I totally looked forward to doing my alter ego band sessions after Daydream each night. She wrote the songs. She produced them. She sang the lead vocals on the demos. She was channeling her inner Courtney Love, mocking the very tortured artist trope while simultaneously living it. But because of her image and because Sony would have likely had a collective heart attack, she couldn't release it under her own name. She brought in her friend Clarissa Dane to sing over her vocals, burying Mariah's voice in the mix. Why does this matter? Why are we dedicating time to a forgotten grunge album in a deep dive about Daydream? Because Someone's Ugly Daughter is the shadow self of Daydream. Daydream is the mask, polished, beautiful, composed. Chick is the face behind the mask, angry, distorted, and screaming for release. You cannot understand the smoothness of Underneath the Stars without understanding the jagged edges of Chick. She had to expel the rage so she could sing the love songs. It was a survival mechanism. Back in the main studio, the pressure was mounting. To further push the envelope, Mariah brought in Jermaine Dupri, the young phenomenon behind Criss Cross and Da Brat. The collaboration produced Always Be My Baby, a song that feels like a lazy summer afternoon. It's relaxed, it's breezy, but the conditions in which it was made were militant.
So she was showing me around the house, and she was telling me, shh. Because in some rooms, like the closet in certain places, they had microphones in the wall. So she would tell me, you know, when is a good time to talk about shit and when it was not or whatever. So, you know, she showed me her cars, and it was like 15 cars in the garage. Whose cars is these? She was like, they mine. I said, well, bitch, let's go. I said, what's near here? And she was like, there's a Burger King up the street. I was like, let's go get some fries. So we get in the car.
What car now?
I think it was a Cadillac. It was like a pink, old school pink Cadillac. Mm-hmm. Everything was shined up and brand new. No scratches. It was just clean. I was like, oh my God, in heaven. So we gets out. She never told me she don't drive, or she never really drove the cars. Tommy, I guess, just bought them for her. Mm-hmm. So they just sit there. So we in the car, we riding, she driving, I'm chilling. I'm like, yes, I'm having a good time. We playing music. And then all of a sudden my phone started blowing up. I think we had the Skytails or something back then. And JD was like, get back here right now, Brad. I don't know what y'all doing, but you need to get back here. They need you back right now. I'm like, Nigga, no. We going to Burger King up the street. What is wrong with you? We going a mile up the street to Burger King. So I see you when I see you, nigga, when I get back. He kept blowing me up like, Brett, no, you don't understand. I need you to get back. I didn't know they had the guns out where JD was at, making him tell me to get her back here. I'm like, it ain't me that was gone. Mariah wanted to go too. She the one that drove. So yeah, that's what happened.
So it was Mariah Peoples, like
it's Tommy Mottola.
Okay.
Tommy Mottola. So when we came back, they took her away, and I was like, oh my God, I felt like she was in trouble. Like Tommy Mottola, she was really like a princess in the castle. Like it was like on Shrek when the princess Fiona was in the castle and could not, and honestly, when we was in that house, anytime she would laugh, anytime she would look like she was having fun, security would come get her. Like it was a horrible but good experience for me, but I hated seeing her like that.
Jermaine Dupri later revealed the absurdity of the recording schedule. They didn't work late nights. They didn't vibe until 4 a.m. with candles and wine. They worked strictly from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Why? Because at 5:30 p.m. sharp, Tommy would arrive to collect his wife for dinner. They were creating the most soulful, effortless music of the decade on a corporate timetable that was stricter than a bank. But even in those limited hours, Mariah was innovating.
She came in the studio and she was like, I want to make a record like this. She said, I want to sing over this. And it was Cream, Wu-Tang Clan. And I'm like, what?
Who are you?
I'm like, you want to sing over this? She's like, yeah. Then she played another record. I'm going to sing over this one. And I'm like, I'm looking around like, what the f is going on? Like, this Mariah Carey. You want me to make this for you? I'm not doing that because I'm not gonna be the person. I'm not doing that. They're not gonna do that with me. Right. She's like, listen, this is what I want to do. So I started following her lead, and she was like, I need something like Just Kicking It, but I wanted to be pretty. But I wanted to have that ghetto shit on it that y'all got and Just Kicking It. Manuel started playing. He started playing that and she like, yes. Change the key to where she wanted it. Then I put the 808s on there and Always Be My Baby comes to life.
Let's keep winning.
And that's the beginning of me and Mariah's relationship.
On Always Be My Baby, she perfected the double voice technique. She lays down the background vocals in her lower register, rich, thick, almost baritone textures, and then belts the high chest notes over the top. It creates a wall of sound that feels light as air, but is actually incredibly dense. Dupri initially thought the song was too simple. He thought the doo-doo-doo hook was too basic, and he was wrong. Always Be My Baby became a sleeper agent. It didn't debut at #1. It had to climb, but it became an airplay monster. On the charts, it hit #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, and it sat at #3 on the UK official charts. It tied her with Whitney Houston and Madonna for the most #1s by a female artist. It proved that Mariah could be chill without losing her commercial dominance. And the collaboration didn't stop there. They also produced Long Ago, a deep cut that I consider one of the best R&B tracks of the 90s. This track slides, it's moody. It's the sound of Mariah commanding a hip-hop beat without trying too hard. It was further proof that her ear for the pocket was unmatched. But Daydream wasn't just about street cred and secret grunge albums. It was also about fate. Late in the recording process, Mariah had a chorus idea. She was writing about loss, specifically the death of David Cole from C&C Music Factory, a close friend and collaborator. She realized that the melody was crying out for a vocal group. At the time, Boyz II Men were the only act that could rival Mariah's commercial power. The collaboration made sense on paper. But what happened in the studio was eerie. Mariah sang them her idea. Nate Morris from the group looked at her stunned and said, "I've been writing a song that is basically identical to this."
I wrote the initial idea for the song with Walter Afanasieff, who I collaborate with for the past few albums. And then after I wrote the chorus, I stopped because I really, really wanted Boyz II Men to do it with me. And I just said, this would be perfect for, I'm like, this should have the style of vocals that Boyz II Men do. And then I'm like, I want to see if I can get Boyz II Men to do it with me. And so, it takes a lot to put the scheduling thing together, and, they're busy, I'm busy, everything else. And then they came in and I was just like, oh, I hope they like it. I was nervous singing it for them. they're all incredible singers, you know, individually. So, anyway, when I sang it to them, they had this kind of strange reaction because Nate had written a song that was basically identical in the theme for their road manager who had passed away. And melodically, the songs just worked perfectly. I mean, his song fit over my song, so we put them together, and then we finished it.
The themes matched, the melodies matched. They could literally sing Nate's song over Mariah's song, and they locked together. It wasn't just songwriting, it was alchemy. They merged the tracks, they entered the booth, and One Sweet Day was born. When we talk about One Sweet Day, we aren't talking about a hit song. We're talking about a statistical anomaly. It debuted at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, and then it just stayed there for 16 consecutive weeks, 4 months, through Christmas, through New Year's, through Valentine's Day. It blocked everyone. It suffocated the charts. It held that record for 23 years, surviving the TRL era, the iTunes era, and the beginning of the streaming era. Globally, it was a smash, hitting #6 in the UK, #1 in New Zealand and Canada. It was the moment Mariah Carey moved from being a pop star to being a standard. While Mariah was pushing into hip-hop with O.D.B. and R&B with Boyz II Men, she was savvy enough to know that she still needed to service her global audience. The European and Asian markets still viewed her as the premier balladeer of the world, so she recorded Open Arms. To the casual listener, this is just a cover of a Journey power ballad, but for Mariah, this was personal history. Randy Jackson, who would later become her key musical director, had actually played bass for Journey.
She is probably, for me, in my estimation, one of the greatest talents we've ever had, because you have Celine. We're going to keep it real, right? You know I always keep it real. We have Celine, we have Whitney. Great singers, sold 100 million albums, 120 million albums each. Mariah sold 165 million albums, but most importantly, she co-wrote every one of them. Co-wrote 19 #1 records, co-wrote, co-produced all of them. That's the difference. When you actually are in control of your own destiny, meaning that you can write and you're just not waiting for songwriters to bring you songs, dude, that's bigger than anything.
In the mid-80s, Steve Smith, their drummer, had played on Mariah's early records. Open Arms served as the album's diplomatic passport. While the US was obsessing over the Fantasy remix, Open Arms was released as a single in Europe. It hit #4 on the UK official charts and landed her a performance on BBC's legendary Top of the Pops. It also conquered the adult contemporary charts in the US with tracks like Forever, ensuring that while she was gaining with the cool kids, she wasn't losing the parents. It was a masterclass in demographic coverage. When the album dropped, the reviews were, for the first time in her career, glowing. Stephen Holden of the New York Times wrote that her songwriting had improved dramatically. He called the album relaxed, sexier, and less reliant on thudding cliches. He specifically noted that Fantasy contains some of the most gorgeously spun choral music to be found on a contemporary album. Chio H. Coker at the Los Angeles Times said Daydream boasted material that would silence her critics, offering something for everyone while remaining true to her essence. But the most enduring image of this era isn't the reviews or the charts, it's the video for Fantasy. Mariah directed it herself. There were no gowns, no dramatic lighting, just Mariah at Rye Playland, rollerblading, riding the dragon coaster, looking like a real person. There's a metaphor here that is impossible to ignore. There she is, strapped into a roller coaster, screaming with joy, while the machine hurls her around a track she can't control. That was her life in 1995. She was the passenger in the most lucrative vehicle Sony Music had ever built, and the vehicle was moving too fast to stop. The success of Daydream demanded a tour, but Mariah was exhausted. The Music Box tour had drained her, and the tension at home made the idea of traveling the world daunting. So the Daydream World Tour became a phantom. She didn't tour the United States. If you were an American fan in 1996, you had to watch the Madison Square Garden special on TV. To see her live, you had to go to Japan or Europe. She kicked off the tour at the Tokyo Dome. 3 nights, sold out instantly, over 150,000 tickets gone. The Tokyo Dome shows are legendary because they capture Mariah at her absolute vocal zenith. The agility, the power, the confidence, the lightness of her voice. She was singing with a freedom we hadn't seen from her before. But watching the footage now, knowing what we know about her personal life, there's a sadness behind the eyes. She would finish these shows playing to 50,000 screaming fans and then go back to a hotel room where she felt like a prisoner. The tour was short. Japan, Germany, France, the Netherlands, and the UK, and then it was over. She retreated back to New York, back to the studio, and back to the struggle. February 28, 1996, the Shrine Auditorium, the 38th annual Grammy Awards. This was supposed to be the coronation. Daydream was a critical darling. It was a commercial monster. She was nominated for 6 awards, including Album of the Year. The narrative was set. The industry was finally going to give Mariah Carey her due. She opened the show with Boyz II Men singing One Sweet Day. It was a flawless performance. And then the awards started being announced. Best Pop Album lost to Joni Mitchell.
Fantasy, Mariah Carey.
The Grammy goes to... No More I Love Yous, Annie Lennox.
Record of the Year lost to Seal. Album of the Year lost to Alanis Morissette. 0. She went 0 for 6. With every loss, the camera zoomed in tighter on her face. She maintained the smile, but her eyes told a different story. It was a public humiliation.
Do you really think I watched that show?
I don't know if you did or not. I'm taking that to say no, you did not.
It's, to quote my 5-year-old son, it's Boeing. Okay? It's boring as hell.
So you don't
After they foiled me back in the day when I had, like, there was a year that I pretty much had a #1 song the entire year, and then they nominated me for 6. I mean, people think I'm really mad about this, and I'm not mad about it. It's just curious to me because now they kind of switched it.
In hindsight, this loss was the most important thing that ever happened to her. If she had won, maybe she stays safe. Maybe she keeps making Music Box 2.0. The loss proved that playing by their rules didn't guarantee respect. So why play by their rules at all? That night, the good girl died, and the independent woman who would create Butterfly began to wake up. Psychologically, a daydream is defined as a wishful thought pattern that occurs while awake. It represents roughly 50% of our waking hours. It's a tool for creativity, but it's also a mechanism for mental escape. Mariah Carey wasn't just making an album called Daydream. She was living in one. Because when the studio door finally closed, that was the only place she truly felt free. So, 30 years later, what's the legacy of this escape? I ranked Daydream #1 on my list of Mariah's albums in my Mariah Carey album ranking video. It is the blueprint. When you hear Beyonce rapping in melody, that's the door Daydream opened. When you hear Ariana Grande collaborating with a rapper on a pop remix, that's the formula Daydream invented. When you hear genre blending of modern music, but pop, R&B, and hip-hop live in the same house, Daydream built that house. Vibe magazine noted that this album graduated Mariah from a Titanic-y ballad voice box to the R&B pop queen. But the soul of this album isn't the hits, it's the final track, Looking In.
She smiles through 1,000 tears and harbors adolescent fears. She dreams of all that she can never be. She wades in insecurity and hides herself inside of me. Is this you?
I mean, you know, it's for anyone who can relate to that, especially being in the public eye. People have a perception of you, good, bad, or indifferent.
Right.
You know what I mean? They all form opinions of you, as we do with anyone in our lives that we encounter, you know? But I guess when you start to deal with it on this level of constantly being scrutinized,
right,
you know, and constantly having opinions formed about you, I don't know. I think it's just something that it's a really tough situation to be in, because the outer person is not always necessarily the inner person, you know? So...
Written in 15 minutes, stripped naked, she plays out a part hiding a broken heart. While the world was dancing to fantasy, Mariah was telling us exactly what was happening. She was trapping herself in a song, hoping anyone would hear her. Daydream is a bittersweet masterpiece. It's the sound of a woman building a castle so high that she could finally see over the walls of her own prison. It paved the way for Butterfly. It inspired a generation. But most importantly, Daydream is the album where Mariah Carey finally met herself. And once they met, she never let go. Thanks for watching. I'm James. This is Trendy Pop. Please hit like, leave a comment, and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss future deep dives. And I'll see you next time.